All right. So I got a message that we are being live streamed on YouTube. So first off, I hope that everyone enjoyed their Thanksgiving weekend and is ready to dive into our meeting today. We have an educational forum in response to the rising number of unlicensed smoke shops in CB10 and marketing tobacco, e-cigarettes, and cannabis products to minors. I think education is the best way to go about this topic because we're in no position to say, do this, don't do this, but we are responsible to give people informative decisions and to give them the potential harms of such practices, especially to our youth. We have representatives from NYC Smoke Free Partnership in attendance to provide a presentation and respond to some of the questions that may come up. We also have school representatives from local middle and high schools. So we are very happy to have them here, as well as our community members. Of course, our members of the Senior Issues, Housing, Health, and Welfare Committee are in attendance, as well as members from the Youth Services, Education, and Libraries Committee. So I welcome all our viewers here today. Before I begin our official introduction, I just like to remind everyone to keep themselves muted at all times unless you're called upon to ask a question. If you have a question or comment, you can utilize the raise hand feature on the bottom of the screen or put it in the chat and we'll be looking at that. With that, I give our virtual stage to our district manager, Josephine Beckman, with a short presentation, and then we'll have Juliet Cuthbertson and Vanetta Dudley from NYC Smoke Free Partnership to give us a small presentation today.
Thank you, Jana. So I just wanted to give a brief overview to committee members of kind of why we're here today and why we've begun the series and invited New York City Smoke Free tonight. So over the last 2 months, the Community Board 10 District Office has received calls from area residents concerned about what feels like a sudden proliferation of smoke shops in the area. The sale of everything, from e-cigs to hookah pipes to e-cigarettes and people are concerned, unlicensed tobacco sales. The Department of Consumer and Worker Protection is the agency that is responsible for enforcement. They also set limits on the number of retail licenses by community district, and that really stems from legislation and advocacy from great groups like New York City Smoke Free. There were 24 locations in CB10 that were reported that we have asked for DCWP to investigate, and that includes unlicensed tobacco sales and cigarette sales. So I just wanted to show committee members some examples of the signage of these new smoke shops that we cannot find on NYC open data that are licensed. And I'm just going to scroll through them to just give you an idea of what we're talking about in terms of advertising and signage. What, local residents are saying, it kind of really appeals to, cartoon characters, names like Puff and Pass, really glorifying smoking, and also marijuana, Grim Reefer, candy and smoke shops. So let's go get some candy and, looking at other, vaping and other smoking type of products, stores called Gelato. The one to the left here with little, cartoon character convenience with a pipe and all kinds of smoking things and smoke making it look, like it's good and positive. I love the candy shop and Munchies. The Wake and Cake, this is all an edible place. So it just gives you an idea of the types of, stores that have been popping up and that, neighbors are concerned about. So today's meeting will be the first in a series to educate the community regarding the rising number of unlicensed smoke shops in CB10. We hope to raise awareness. And the Police and Public Safety Committee of Community Board 10, it's not on this slide, but we did pass a resolution as far as the marijuana, unlicensed cannabis sales are concerned, calling upon the state to tighten up their enforcement provisions, which seem not to be clear, according to enforcement that have notified Community Board 10. One of the cannabis shops, as an aside, did have a raid, and my understanding has moved on. But again, we have many other, tobacco and other, unlicensed smoke shops that are opening that we hope to work on. So the bottom line is we're here to start this education campaign, and representatives from New York City Smoke-Free Partnership will be here, and they are here. Julia Cuthbertson, I'm so happy to see you again.
Yeah.
The committee will discuss its district-wide campaign. Parents and student leaders from local middle and high schools were invited to attend. And those who are unable to attend, we're going to be sharing this and going to be continuing the conversation and decide what our next steps are. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Julia, will you be doing the presentation?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll kick things off and I will share my screen. Let's see. This one. All right. I take it you can all see that.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you for having me. I was participated in a panel exactly 3 years ago, and it was a really amazing conversation with great partners. So thank you for organizing once again. And I will jump right in. So NYC Smoke Free is a program of public health solutions. It's sort of our umbrella org, and public health solutions is the largest nonprofit, public health nonprofit in New York City. It's been around since the 1960s, does lots of great work in all 5 boroughs, both direct service work and policy and advocacy programs such as NYC Smoke Free. We have many different initiative areas. I am Brooklyn's community engagement manager, so I actually do more smoke-free housing work. So if anyone lives in a residential building and you experience secondhand smoke exposure and you would like to come up with a solution for that by bringing your building smoke-free, I do lots of work around that. We also work with businesses and faith-based organizations to bring them smoke-free as well if they have are experiencing smoking in and around their entrance or any outdoor areas. And we also have a youth engagement component, which is done primarily by my partner in Brooklyn named Edric Robinson. And that addresses tobacco imagery in youth-rated movies and internet. And also what we're going to talk about today, which is the retail side. And he's actually out of the office, so I am filling in for him, which is also why I have Vanetta Dudley here as well, who's NYC Smoke Free's director. She was for many, many years the Bronx youth engagement manager, so she is also very knowledgeable about this. So I might be calling on her at some point to answer some questions, but let's get going. And then Reality Check, just to explain that, is the name of our youth engagement program that's on the New York State level. So we are funded by the New York State Bureau of Tobacco Control, and Reality Check is the name of the program on a statewide level that engages youth to become health advocates. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. So, of course, in the beginning, we had these types of ads, which might look familiar to some people. Of course, you know, smoking was cool. Smoking was done by your favorite actor. Smoking was even done by your own doctor. These are now quite famous and kind of shocking ads. We're probably familiar with them. Lots of celebrity endorsements. A great quote from Philip Morris: "Today's teenagers, tomorrow's potential customer." Okay, so why are teens targeted? Well, we know that the earlier you start smoking, the more likely you are to become addicted to nicotine, right? Teens are very brand loyal. We also know that most smokers, almost all smokers, over 90% start before the age of 18. So that's high school students and middle school students that we're really concerned about. And, you know, teens are less likely to be concerned about their future health. So the new wave are electronic nicotine devices. So you know, this is what our forum was about 3 years ago. They've been on the market now for about 8-9 years. They take many different shapes and sizes and forms. You know, they used to be the kind of clunkier ones, the large size tank devices in the graphic, but now they're quite slick. They're easily hidden. They often look like USBs, such as the Juuls, you know, that became the most well-known brand. So very easy to hide and constantly changing forms so that they're easy to be, you know, hidden. All right, so we see the rise of e-cigarette use over time. from grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. The last data point that we have is 2018. I think the pandemic interrupted a lot of survey actions, so we don't have the most recent data, but it is increasing steadily. Okay, so hang on one second. There's some blocking my own. There we go. There we go. So e-cigarette use has increased dramatically by 160% since 2014. Nearly 1 in 4 seniors use e-cigarettes. And that translates to 1 in 6 New York City public high school students currently using. This is quite alarming. All right, so this is, for me, when I first saw this graph, was the most shocking. What do teens say is in their e-cigarette, right? So this is on purpose by tobacco companies, that teens don't know what's in these products. And most of them think that it's just flavoring, right? 2/3 think it's just flavoring. A small percentage, only 13%, think that there's nicotine in it. Many don't know. Some think there's marijuana or something else. Many think it's just water vapor. We know this is not true. All right, and there's a list of long chemicals. These are all what is in our e-cigarettes that a lot of teens are using, right? So not stuff that you want to put in your body, and I think that most teens are completely unaware that these are the chemicals in the products that they are smoking, right? All right, so what is in the vapor, right? So in an e-cigarette, you're inhaling vapor through your mouth from usually a battery operated electronic device. It heats it up and it vaporizes a liquid or a solid, right? So the smoke exhaled from an e-cigarette can contain lots of cancer-causing agents, ultrafine particles that can be nestled deep inside your respiratory system, aerosols, flavorants, and heavy metals, such as nickel, tin, and lead. And this is associated with what you've probably heard of as popcorn lung. So, not just vapor. So as you can guess, of course, the health effects of e-cigarette usage are not good. Not good for anyone, but especially not teens and middle schoolers who still have developing brains and are more susceptible to addiction, right? So most e-cigarettes do contain nicotine. We know nicotine is highly addictive. It can harm adolescent brain development, which we know that boys' brains can develop up until the age of 26 and girls until 20, so well until adulthood, which is alarming. And young people who use e-cigarettes may be more likely to smoke conventional cigarettes in the future. It can be sort of seen as a bit of a gateway once that addiction is in place. All right, the secret ingredient, another great quote. It's a well-known fact that teenagers like sweet products. Back in the early 70s, they knew that. All right, so flavors, this is the big problem, right? Over 80% of youth and teens who've used tobacco started with a flavored product. The flavor of tobacco is not entirely appealing to a teen, but bubblegum and cherry and strawberry, well, they are. 97% of youth e-cigarette users have used a flavored cigarette in the past month, and fruit and mint flavors are the favorites. And these are just some of the flavors on the market. We know that Juul, there was quite a famous case where Juul had to get rid of almost all of their flavors in the market. They still have some. But that's just because they were the most famous brand out there and involved in the case. But there's still plenty of brands out there that have lots of flavors, just like this. Some of them, I don't even know what it means. Meteor milk, no idea. But point is, if I were a teen, maybe I would purchase that out of curiosity, right? Okay. So we know vaping and hookah. Hookah has also been, I know, a big issue in CB10, has been a growing trend. Of course, teens think that e-cigarettes are safer than traditional cigarettes. And we're seeing them more and more in media, in movies, magazines, and social media. Here's some examples in social media, lots of videos, jewels for sale. It's become really popular to do these like vaping, like vape cloud videos, which you can see on the left. Very young children, even trying them. Lots of humor used around them. Okay, so what are we doing? We're a very small team, teams of 2 in every borough, but we're doing as much as we can to address this issue. And a lot of it is what we're doing right now, right? So participating in community events, and community boards, working with local and state elected officials. We partner with community organizations, high schools, colleges, advocacy groups, social groups. We like to engage with parent and school meetings, PTAs. We've been doing movie screenings to raise awareness around tobacco imagery in movies as well. And getting back to Reality Check, which is the statewide program, it's really an amazing opportunity for, it's for 13 to 18-year-olds to get involved and really become health advocates that lead their peers to make positive changes, because we know that teens are more likely to listen to each other than to listen to adults. Right. And this is done through grassroots education, planning, and working with other peers and elected leaders. And, you know, it's not really at the end of the day about tobacco control work. It's really about the skills that they gain through focusing on these issues, which are really important to them. And so they work on public speaking and writing skills, leadership skills. There's lots of opportunities. We try to get creative. And they have a lot of fun at the end of the day. So this is actually Edric Robinson's information here. He's the youth engagement manager in Brooklyn, but also I'm very happy to Josephine has my contact, and I'm very happy to be in touch with you as well. And that is the end of the presentation. So I will stop the share unless you have any other questions focused on any of those slides, but very happy to answer any questions or talk about the work that we've done. Yeah. Or hear a bit more about what you're seeing. I love seeing, it was loved and hated seeing the images that you shared, Josephine, but that's really interesting for us to actually see what you're seeing on the ground. And, interesting to see what'll happen as marijuana legalization becomes more apparent in our communities as well.
Yes. So we're hearing, we're hearing from parents who are concerned, lots of teens walk home and they're on local school routes, and which is why, Jana had reached out and, she was hearing it. Lots of us here are hearing it. And we really wanted to know how best we can, I guess there's 2 ways, there's 2 directions that the board can take. One is, of course, we can request enforcement. But more important, I guess equally as important too, is to educate. And how do we best do that with our youth and really explore ways that we can be helpful in our role as board members in advocacy. So that's kind of like what we're here to brainstorm. And since you've done so much work in the field, we thought it was a good way to start the conversation. Absolutely. But there are some questions. I don't want to monopolize. So Jana, let's see if we'll start with our committee members first.
Yes. So thank you so much for that presentation. I think it's really telling to how many people don't know what's actually in these products, especially our youth, because it is tasty. Actually, even when you stand behind someone that has that fruity flavor and then you smell it, it doesn't smell bad. It actually smells kind of sweet. So, but you don't realize that actually you can get cancer from it and things like that. So education is very, very important. With that being said, our first question is from Justin. So go ahead and unmute.
I just wanted to ask, what was the name of that youth organization?
It's called Reality Check.
Reality Check.
So that's the name of the statewide program. So you'll find Reality Check in basically every county in New York State, but in New York City, it's through NYC Smoke Free. And so we have different youth engagement managers in every borough who work mainly with high schools. And each, every borough looks a little bit different depending on what the youth engagement manager chooses to do. But it's been really, I think, meaningful work. And in fact, we try to bring high schoolers with us now that we're back to doing it in person for a day in Albany to meet with state elected officials and discuss the work that we do, really educate on the work that we do and how why it's so important. And so I think it would be great if Edric can, get a hold of some high schools who would like to work with him. That could be a really good way to engage with our work. We've also maybe we should look into organizing an event where local elected officials can attend. There's lots of different ways to do that, and it can take many different shapes, but just something to put out there.
Yeah, maybe with our local high school, actually, we can connect some of his programs. And then also if we can have access to that PowerPoint after this meeting, that would be really helpful too for members. Are there any other questions? Justin has a follow-up question, maybe.
Yeah, so I actually work for a youth organization and my wife works at a school, a high school. So she works in Brooklyn. So would we reach out to you in regards to that? And I work in Manhattan.
Okay, so I'll send you my information as well as Edric's, or send it to Josephine maybe, who can send it out. And I can send you my information. Edric's our Manhattan counterpart named Io, who does youth engagement work in Manhattan, as well as the material, so you can take a look again at all the visuals that I shared.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Great. Jana, we have a member of the public who has their hand raised, so I'm just going to call and unmute. Antoinette Wagnerman. Antoinette, you should be able to unmute now. Antoinette?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, actually, it's Michael Wagnerman.
Oh, okay.
I'm the husband, but
Okay,
I guess you can't see me, right? Okay, can you see me?
Yeah.
I got the camera here, and why it's not coming up? Okay,
Okay.
I just have a couple questions. I'm an ex-smoker. I stopped about 35 years ago. And one of my questions, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. One of my questions is, why don't we see more anti-vaping public announcements like we used to see for tobacco and cigarettes? I don't see any anti-vaping commercials. Shouldn't there be more? I mean, shouldn't we somehow get the the support of the government or the support of the whoever can do this to see more anti-smoking commercials and anti-vaping commercials? That's number one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think especially with public health campaigns, lack of funds is always an issue. And at the end of the day, traditional conventional cigarettes are still actually used more than vaping, and vaping is with teens. So I think sometimes when you have limited dollars, they choose to spend it on, they just follow the statistics and they say, well, actually conventional cigarettes are still a bigger problem in terms of numbers. And so advertisement goes towards, anti-cigarettes, but it's true that that there should be more focusing on vaping. And there are some people out there doing that, but hopefully we'll see more.
Okay, and one other quick question. I noticed in my neighborhood, there's a number of these hookah bars. Isn't that basically similar to vaping, smoking hookah?
Yep. It is, different device, and but also with the flavors makes it quite appealing. And feels less harsh, I think, when you are using hookah. And There was a hookah bill that was passed in the city council a few years ago. So it should be less of a problem now. You can't have hookah if the majority of your revenue comes from other things. So it has to be like a dedicated hookah lounge, which I think did cut back on some hookah establishments. But they are not, illegal. So there are still some that are there, and there's probably some still operating, illegally. So it's a question of enforcement at the end of the day. But yeah, hookah is a big problem as well.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. We're going to move on. There's some panelists, committee
Yes.
members, Jana?
Yes. Also, I'm going to put in the chat one of the ads that always comes up. Sometimes I see it vape is Truth Orange. Very nice ads. So check them out. Okay.
Truth does great work.
They're nice, right? Next we have Barbara Jermak. You can unmute and ask your question. Make sure to unmute. Yeah.
Your presentation has been excellent. Have you been doing this to parent groups?
So Edric is my partner who normally does these presentations, and so I believe he has been in schools and PTAs and stuff like that. But I'll have to ask him exactly who he has met with. But yeah, that's really who it's geared towards. We also work closely with PAVE, Parents Against Vaping and E-Cigarettes, and they're now citywide and have taken it beyond. But they're really hooked in also to parent groups as well. So if you have suggestions of, other groups that would be great to meet with who might want to hear this information, we're all ears. We love being connected to anyone who wants to talk to us. So we'd love that.
Our next question, Barbara Pollock. Make sure you unmute first.
That do it?
Great.
Yes. Hi. I'm a retired middle school teacher. I taught at middle school 51. And I know that one of the problems we had in our school community was that often high school students would come and introduce e-cigarettes to our students during recess, or our kids had free lunch. They were allowed to go out for lunch. And I'm wondering how the outreach to middle school differs from the outreach to high school.
That's an interesting question. Danetta, you might be able to enlighten us more since you did this work in the Bronx.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. We would conduct, the same type of, presentations to really educate, if it's the students, of course, coming in on a softer level and really getting them to understand how this had like a negative impact on their body, and how it can affect them that way. Because of the parameters of the program Reality Check, we do a little bit more focus with the group 13 to 18, but we do not deny any middle school who has interest in this. We've actually conducted quite a few presentations to, some middle schools throughout all the boroughs. And a lot of the students there, they really are receptive to the information. They actually have a lot of insight too, and they do understand the harms from an early age. So it is refreshing to see that and hear that from them. But we want to make sure that when we provide the information, it's all the same all across the board, so messages don't get misconstrued. So like Julia said before, if there's opportunity for any middle school or high school, we are happy to do the presentation. Just that when students become involved in Reality Check, it's a more of a focus on that high school age group. But presentations, whether it's PTA, middle school, high school, other youth-based organizations, that can always happen at any time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question, Julie.
Okay, I unmuted. I was thinking, what could be more impactful and probably more effective is, like when you go to not that I've gone to an AA meeting, I don't drink, but when you go to an AA meeting or you, see the commercials on TV, that woman in particular who was a smoker and had her voice box removed and all that, if you had people come to the schools who ended up getting very sick, but survived, of course, from vaping. And you had those people come into the schools and talk to these kids and tell them, this is what happened to me. This is what is going to happen to you if you continue this. I think that would make an impact, because then they're going to see for themselves there's somebody there who was them. You know, that person was the teenager doing that. And now look what, you know, how they've been affected, you know, physically. So personally, I think that's a much bigger impact than, you know, ads and this and that. Kids don't look at ads. Oh, smoking's bad for you. And, you know, the smoking stuff, the man that brought up the point before about having more anti-vaping ads. Yes, it is interesting that you don't see that. But I don't think that children or that high schoolers or, you know, students are going to give a damn. They're going to see an ad in a subway or somewhere. They're going to ignore it. But if they hear someone speaking to them personally, in person, that has been ill from that, I think that might change their mind. So that's all I
that's
want
a
to say.
good, that's a good idea. And yeah, I think for ads, it would have to be targeted in a very different way for teens to even see them, right? Whether it's like on social media or YouTube or something like that. But yeah, we should think about that. It's probably a question of, because these products are relatively new, although there have been people who've already seen a lot of negative health consequences, there just aren't as many, you know, as like the traditional smokers who have been around for decades. And so I think it's a question of identifying someone who has experienced these negative health effects and is willing to, you know, talk about it and join us. So, but I think it's a great thing to keep in mind. So thank you.
Yeah, and you know, with that, I can say definitely like the group that we work with, PAVE, because they're entitled, you know, Parents Against Vaping and e-cigarettes, you know, they really do share a lot of their personal stories too, because they are mothers who they actually saw their child go through this. And, you know, they had, you know, to deal with the repercussions as a parent. So sometimes it's those stories. We actually get a lot of personal stories too from the youth themselves, where they see it. And sometimes when we have these discussions, they're open to it and they talk about it. Maybe they saw this person, they saw that person. It can even be a family member or a parent. Sometimes that's what even encourages them to join Reality Check. So we do get a lot of the personal stories. I can even say myself, a school that I worked with in the Bronx, which was my high school, one of the teachers there, she actually will tell the story around Great American Smokeout when we do events and activities. And she tells the students there that when she started the school, she was a smoker and she ended up quitting because the students saw her and went to her and was like, well, you smoke cigarettes. And because of that, it changed her from smoking cigarettes, and that made her stop. And this was, you know, back in 2000. I'm probably telling my age right now, but this was back in 2000. So the personal stories, you were absolutely right, does have a really strong impact. And I think we can definitely encourage more of that, especially like through our work, and even some of the adults that we partner with when they bring us in to do these presentations, if they have somebody that can share and do that, it would be, you know, more of an insight too, especially for the youth. So thank you.
Thank you so much for those stories. I think also in high school, it's important to remember, for me, in high school, there was a student who was on the basketball team. And when they used to ask him, well, why don't you smoke marijuana? One of the things that he would say is, well, I can't run anymore if I start to smoke. So I think also having some kind of games or like physical activities where the students are kind of their breathing is affected. I know there are types of masks that can like limit the amount that they're breathing in, and then have them run when they're not wearing those masks, and then realizing, hey, you know, if you smoke, this is what you're going to be breathing all the time. So I think that would be pretty interesting to see how, especially middle school, high school, go through that. Our next question is in the chat, actually. Governor Hochul claimed that she has created jobs in the cannabis business. Is your goal to get people hooked on marijuana? And if so, does this mean that marijuana is different from other smoke products in your view?
For us, smoke is smoke, and marijuana is included in that. And so we don't focus on marijuana. It's not a part of our work formally, but of course we know it's there, and we know that many people also use vape pens to smoke marijuana, you know, THC oil, and that's also a big problem. So no, we are certainly anti any type of smoking and tobacco, or, you know, marijuana proliferation when it's, especially when it's geared towards teens and youth, right? So for our work, we think that, youth their brains are still developing, as we talked about, they're being targeted. And we really want to reduce that and raise the alarm bells. But no, we are certainly not pro marijuana in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, let's see. I know, Justin, your hand was raised a moment ago, if you still have that question.
I realized we're talking mostly about vaping and e-cigarettes and stuff. Mine was more for the cannabis dispensaries in the neighborhood. I just got like 3 questions. I could hold off until we're done with the e-cigarettes if that is what you would prefer, but I think this is more kind of directed towards Josephine.
Okay.
Josephine, what are your thoughts? Would you like to answer them now or later?
You know what, we'll go through just Barbara and then we'll get back to Justin. That would
All
be,
right, sounds good.
I know Julia has a bit of a time constraint till 8, so we'll get all those questions in.
All right, Barbara, if you want to, okay, good.
Hi. Yeah, so I guess what I was thinking about when I initially raised my question was what we've touched on, and that's how peer pressure really does influence kids to try things and to do things, particularly middle school kids who are a little bit more vulnerable to that. So to kind of tag on to what we were saying, if we could get people to also tell their stories about what caused them to start smoking and what caused them to stop and how peer pressure was a factor, I think that would be really, really, really helpful. I know I started smoking because of peer pressure in high school, and I stopped because my 6-year-old daughter told me, if you really loved me, I asked her what she wanted for her birthday, and she said, if you really loved me, you'd stop smoking. And so the cigarettes went in the garbage. But I think stories that are human and that would help kids to, because I do think kids connect to that, particularly middle schoolers.
I think I think I agree. I think if we, think about organizing some type of follow-up event or in-person event or panel, that it would be great to find teens, young people, or, young adults who've been affected, who found a way to quit and can share why and how.
Right. And I do think, Julia, I mean, from our last event, having school teen leaders who were able to carry that message, because as much as peer pressure could be negative, I think what we found too is that peers can be positive. And especially when they are, as Janice said earlier, that example of the basketball player and maybe, gearing in events like that, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so Justin, I guess we'll go back to you. You had 3 questions on the cannabis.
All right, so I guess question 1, are any of the distributors in Bay Ridge licensed?
No, not one.
Not one, gotcha. And whenever we do begin the licensing process, who's going to be approving it? Is it like is it going to be similar to
Similar to the state liquor authority? There's an Office of Cannabis Management. So while they've issued, I think they've made recommendations for the first licensing, I don't believe any of them are in Brooklyn yet because of a lawsuit. But my understanding from a meeting I attended was that there will be an opportunity for community boards to comment, similar as we do in advisory role and liquor licenses, pertaining specifically to time, place, and manner. But we haven't really even received yet formal guidelines or rules about that at all. We had one initial meeting that was still within rule formation, and we haven't had a meeting since. Kind of learns a lot with the number of calls we received about the illegal dispensaries and the smoke shops that are selling cannabis products. There's some, vagueness in the law about, with enforcement, both on the cannabis end and on the tobacco end, what we're learning. So even unlicensed tobacco shops, while they may be getting ECB summonses, they take a long time to adjudicate, which is frustrating to everyone, including licensed tobacco shops, because
Mhm.
you have licensing, and that provides consumers with consumer protection, public health safety, knowing what retail products are being sold as they should be under the license. And when you're unlicensed, there are other tax violations potentially, and just overall, there's a cap of licenses, retail licenses that can be distributed by community district. And we've already exceeded that, but those are grandfathered in. And so no new shops should be opening, but yet we're seeing so many. And we're waiting to hear back from enforcement because they are visiting the locations we've provided.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And then my last one was just, do you have a comprehensive guide? But I think you answered that with they haven't even provided it to you guys
Not
yet.
yet, right.
Awesome. Thank you
But
so much.
we will update the board once we do, for sure, board members. Jana?
All right. I think there's one more question that maybe we can end off with this. Oh, two more questions. So let me get Stephanie first, because that one's live, and then we'll read the one in the comments and we'll end there.
Thank you. I know earlier, Julia, you mentioned that you sometimes bring students to politicians or you invite them to your events. I was curious, is that with the intent of trying to change legislation or create legislation, or is it merely just information?
Good question. From our end, it is just for educational purposes.
Okay.
Because we're funded by the states, we are prohibited from lobbying, so we don't go near legislation. But of course, one can guess what we would like to see, and so we just want to provide, the information necessary so that elected officials can see how tobacco in communities is affecting everyone. And it's bringing students and youth with us is actually one of the most amazing parts of the experience, because they love speaking to kids. They're future voters, and so they're also very important. And it's really special to be able to bring students with us. And so sometimes that's Albany, sometimes it's local in-district meetings. But we're always very excited to have students who want to have that kind of experience.
Thank you. The last question that we're going to be answering, I'm not sure that we can answer here, but I will read it in case we can. The Brooklyn Public Library recently held a workshop on opening a cannabis business. Cannabis is marijuana, and certainly everyone sees the two as the same. If we want a smoke-free New York, why isn't the Brooklyn Public Library holding workshops on the dangers of cannabis/marijuana instead?
So right, we don't have a rep here from the Brooklyn Public Library, so I think maybe we can ask that question, certainly, because I do think that many of what we've spoken about tonight is really spreading the word and educating on public health and safety and consumer protection. And I know, Jana, that we've talked about this, and Jane Marie as chair, on ways perhaps the board can maybe develop and collaborate in future events. This was the first in a series, and whether that is collaborating with District 20 schools, parochial schools who do have an interest. We did hear from some schools back who would like to hold educational meetings with students, workshops, etc. And perhaps we can even, like we did with the vaping forum, have a similar type forum with student leaders, or maybe do an art campaign, a poster campaign, an awareness, working with local schools, and try to come up with creative ways to engage the youth. I think we came up with a few good ideas here tonight that we can certainly work on next steps.
Absolutely.
Moving
And I
forward.
think, also with that, we were talking about making the contest for our students. And also, I think that it's important that we get in the conversation so that students aren't the only ones talking to one another. And so that's why these educational forums are so important to have. And despite wanting to end this meeting on a period, we may have to end it on a non-punctuational kind of format, because this conversation will not end here. It will definitely stay. And hopefully, again, Josephine's been so great at actually making this meeting happen. We can continue this series. So if there are not any other questions, Josephine, if you want to have our last word here, then I think we can end the meeting.
Yeah, I think, board members on the call or members of the public, please reach out to us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and also the community board email bk10@cb.nyc.gov. If you're listening to this after the event, we want to hear your ideas, because we want to continue this conversation and continue educational outreach and awareness. I see Jane, our chair, has her chair up. Jane Marie Kapitanakis.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone from NYC Smoke Free once again. And perhaps if we can get their contact information to share with both Superintendent Dr. David Preto here in District 20, and also Superintendent Michael Prayer who supervises the high schools. And so that we can send their information directly to them. And this way we can help spread the word for our schools and our school leaders to be aware of this and of the programs that you have to offer. Thank you so much.
Of course, yeah, I will send my contact info and all the info of everyone in every borough. Basically, there's just 10 of us, and so for whatever, wherever you are, if you have friends in other boroughs, you can also get that information. But thank you for having us.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.